So I'm about 4 kilometers straight up above the Hawaiian island of Oahu. The small and nimble plane that I've used to get up here is finally starting to shake a little bit, the cockpit view offering a glimpse at the rattling instruments and impossibly clear sky as I cross 4,000 meters and the engine starts to sputter. I decide at this point I should probably even out. There's nothing but me in the wind anyway, and as the plane tilts forward, the island comes back into full view once more, and I think to myself, fuck it. With a quick press of a button, I'm back in my Lambo, nose pointed to the horizon as I plummet back to the open world below. I land, just barely missing a thicket of trees and wildflowers, as the car careens out of the grove and I skid to a stop on a random stretch of scenic street. At this point, I cackle to myself in the relatively quiet Ubisoft offices that I've been invited to preview the game, because this is the experience of the Crew Motorfest, and after just a few hours let loose in its idyllic open world, I'm ready for about a dozen or so more, chasing that impossible car drop high. Ubisoft's Ivory Tower team has a fascinating relationship with space. The Crew series is a relatively unassuming set of games. Create a driver, gain renown, collect cars, sprinkle in some fairly ambitious traversal options, and then go about your business and generally try not to think too much about Forza Horizon. But the worlds crafted to host these games are where things start to get interesting for the French studio. Having spent the first 2 titles trying to compact and warp the United States into a relatively seamless open world map, Motorfest sees the team trade scale for scope with its loving rendition of Oahu. Where the Crew 2 presented players with an ambitiously flawed countrywide road trip, Motorfest pivots and banks its confidence into a single island. Procedurally generated shot fronts and geographical headaches are now in the rearview mirror, as Oahu is a dense and textured playground for Motorfest's achingly earnest car enthusiasm. Motorfest doesn't waste any time before showing you its best features, kicking off events with a gorgeous tour of Oahu before dropping you right into the game's signature playlists. These event races are pretty distinctly themed, breakout instances that you can jump into by driving up to their respective starting points at anywhere on the map. In no particular order, these do include Made in Japan, which is an ode to Japanese street racing that turns portions of the island into lavish recreations of Japanese streets. Off-Roading Addict, which is a free-for-all blaze across Hawaiian countryside that ditches strict track structure and instead lets you carve your own path through the mud and the sand. Motorsports Playlist opts for the traditional and pure racing experience of tracks and even tyre wear management and pit stops, where Vintage Garage is a bloody adorable throwback playlist that puts you behind the wheels of classic cars and takes away power steering and boosting for an old school vibe and overall car history lesson. And finally, Lamborghini, well, I mean, it's exactly what it says in the box, isn't it? This is an ode to some of the greatest cars ever made in breakneck races and gorgeously rendered car models. All of this and more is presented to you immediately. Motorsport wastes absolutely no time spinning its wheels, not even for a second. There are a bunch more bespoke playlists scattered throughout the game, most settling into one of the above categories, but some providing some pretty odd and very specific racing options. The game has this relentless MC character called Malu, who in-universe is sort of a fictional PR representative for the event. She will allow you to customize your character using a fairly simple set of options before you're given the choice of your starting vehicle. With your racer customized and pleasantries well out of the way, you are set free on the island. While the preview build that we had access to encouraged us to check out 2 playlist options to get started with, the full release will let go of the wheel pretty early on, trusting you to chart your own course across the genuinely stunning open world. I kicked off with a scenic drive in the Hawaiian Scenic Tour playlist, pretty aptly named. This promises a cruisy race through some of the island's best vistas and vibes. Here, it really didn't matter if I won or not, the aim of the playlist was simply to inhabit a space and take in the full breadth of Ivory Tower's Hawaiian love letter. By all accounts, the team has done the work here as well, traveling to Hawaii and working with native artists and cultural guides to capture the essence of the land and its rich history, ensuring a relatively authentic experience. Still, there's an inescapable strangeness to Motorfest's promise of taking over a whole island just for your pleasure. Even skirting the very strange undercurrents of such a premise, the game itself sometimes feels like an unintentionally grim billionaire fantasy. This island is yours now. The locals will grin from ear to ear about your presence. The rarest cars in the world have been flown in just for you. I mean, fuck, there's even an AI guide built into your cars who exists solely to tell you what a good boy you are and to never really shut up. It doesn't detract from the moment-to-moment gameplay, mind you, but it's just so deeply strange when considered for longer than the heartbeat that Motorfest wants you to think about it for. Now, admittedly, the game is not remotely equipped or designed to tackle any of this absurdity in a meaningful way, but man, those cars. For all of my resplendent words and lofty prose, there's no way around just how good Motorfest feels to play. Striking something of a balance between sim and arcade, cars propel themselves with just the right amount of weight and give, rewarding a feathered touch of the brakes at the right moment or a daring boost during a turn. Every vehicle that I got behind the wheel of had a distinct push and pull to it as well, so much so that it became pretty evident within just the first hour which cars I was going to gravitate towards and which ones I would avoid. The raw speed and fury of the Lambo, for example, was impossible to ignore, while the slower turns of my Volkswagen Combi rattling along scenic routes provided a pretty fitting contrast. Then there's also the sheer variety of one of the game's intro playlists and a personal favourite of mine, Porsche 911 Legacy. The game's playlists typically kick off with a small selection of live-action clips showcasing the history or highlights of any given vehicle or setting, this one aptly giving me a glimpse into the long history of the Porsche brand. With this deserved showboating out of the way, I was able to play through a handful of races that highlighted the history of the make and model, running me from vintage builds like the VLVL 290 all the way up to the modern Carrera 4S 992. Now, as you can tell from that last line reading there, I am not much of a car guy, but even I can tell that these models have been crafted with the utmost care. Each one offering a different feel and understanding of Porsche's history while also just being outright fun to play. Playlists offer up to 6 races on average from what I can tell, with each one having requirements to hit before you unlock the next one. At the beginning of each race, you'll also be invited to tweak the difficulty based on what you need out of it, though the game itself does deploy something of an adaptive difficulty system. It will look at your performance over the past few races and offer up to you what it thinks your racing level is at. You can choose to fully turn this off or have it only ask you once in a while, which I thought was a pretty fantastic way of adapting difficulty. This will in turn impact the rewards and assortment of car parts and currency that you get for winning a race. And this right here is the only part of Motorfest that gives me a little bit of pause. The wind taken slightly out of my adventurous sails the first time I saw the words rare and uncommon flash up under an assortment of car parts I just received for winning a race. There is a clear microeconomy churning in the way in the background of Motorfest. Races also doling out XP for an overall level, a baseline currency used for buying cars, clothing and parts, as well as a second premium currency that I assume will be part of the game's optional additional transactions. Now, it is hard to know how all this will play out in the final release, but for a game so wonderfully good at providing a sense of unbridled freedom, these systems do feel a little bit dated. Much of this is tied up in the game's expansive social hub, the main stage. This showroom setting will be bustling with players and their customized cars, and will also allow access to the game's rotating content updates that will add different car brands and celebrations of those brands to playlists, giving you a chance to rerun races in unique vehicles and the like when the game comes fully online. Any mild concerns I had about the game's background systems quickly faded from memory though as I tore around Oahu. This is a damn stunning bit of technical work and fidelity. The density of this environment is a little bit staggering. To list all the ways in which the map impressed me in just these few hours would err dangerously close to outright propaganda, but it really can't be overstated how much the immersion of the map adds to the already engaging racing systems. Shaded thickets, wave-carved coves, bustling urban sprawls, and towering mountain peaks litter the map. Each drive to the next location a visual treat. Or, if you do want to get a little bit weird with it, Motorfest actually allows for this completely seamless transition between your car, a speedboat, and a small plane, giving you complete freedom in your approach to the island. I never once got tired of flying to an objective marker, bringing the plane low, and switching out to my car, clumsily slamming onto the road with the physics of a Fast and Furious film. Which is ultimately what I took away from this slice of Motorfest, an unrelenting and largely uncompromised expression of freeform play, car history, and fun. The comparisons to Horizon have never been closer, but in many ways it's never mattered less. Motorfest is a bit of a dork about its presentation, but through that earnestness, it actually breaks free from the need to be slick, and instead finds itself in kind of a goofy, but mechanically very sound place. The sheer variety of cars and playlists is impressive, even more so as you dive into each one and uncover a rich history or unique playstyle. And while my foot is still hovering over the brake as I spy those microsystems in the rear view, I can't deny the pull to put pedal to the metal and chase Motorfest's unique horizon.